Hey, are you struggling to land your dream business analyst role? And would you like to know how to get noticed by recruiters and how to stand out in a highly competitive job market? Well, in this podcast, I interview a senior recruitment specialist who shares some really good tips on how to navigate the hiring process, how to craft a resume that catches attention, and how to ace your next interview. Hi, my name is Gaurav, and I'm the founder of Business Analysis Upskill, an IIBA endorsed business analysis training organization. And I offer both practical courses and certification related courses. Hi, everyone. So today I would like to welcome Tess Thomson, who is the Associate Director with Profusion Group. Hi, Tess. How are you?
I'm great, Gaurav. How are you?
Very well. Thank you. It's been probably 5 years since we last saw each other. How have you been?
Yeah, 5 years doesn't feel right though either, does it? Such many things have happened in the world since then. A lot's happened in my world. Recruitment's gone through a lot of changes. It's lovely to see you again.
Wonderful. Same here. Hey, before we start, let's first learn a little bit about Tess. So Tess is the associate director with Profusion Group, a specialist financial services recruitment firm. She leads the projects and transformation portfolio in Melbourne, including the business analysis practice. Tess has been recruiting business analysts in the Melbourne market since 2017, and she has supported many different organizations and industry groups during this time, with the last 3 years focused on financial services. Tess has helped clients build project teams from the ground up, and she has placed dozens of BAs and BA leaders into contract and permanent positions during this time. Now, just to add to that, many years ago, Tess helped me also secure a senior BA role with a Victorian state government agency. And thank you again for that, Tess.
Of course, it's a pleasure. It's the beginning of our relationship.
100%. Well, thanks a lot for joining us, Tess. I'm sure people are so excited to learn so much from you. So in this podcast, we'll be gaining some valuable insights from Tess about how she recruits BAs for different organizations, what she looks for in candidates, their resumes, and many other such related aspects. So shall we start?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So let's start from the very start. So please walk us through the end-to-end recruitment process, like from the time you hear about a new job from an employer, what happens then onwards?
Yeah, okay, absolutely. So it is quite an extensive life cycle and process that we undertake as recruitment consultants. And it all starts with the job brief. So the job brief, we will, either be meeting with a client and learn about a new, requirement to bring in somebody new within their team, or they might reach out to us directly to speak about that specifically. And in that session, I will want to understand a refreshed knowledge of their team structure. So it might be somebody that I've worked with for a long time, but I will always make sure that I know what changes might have happened since I last went through that information. So where will this role play in their broader team and organization? I'll also want to know a bit about their team culture, and that will help me understand some of the softer skills and cultural aspects that will be right for the person coming into this team. Is it a new role, or is it a replacement role? If it's a replacement role, what happened in terms of the incumbent person that was in that position? In the world of projects, I want to know, is this in relation to a new project or an existing project? What stage is the project operating at? That will help me understand whether, experience documenting business cases or tender documentation is important, or whether a BA that's got heaps of experience with more of the implementation phase is more essential to the requirement. So the briefings can be really detailed. I want to know what the essential skills versus the nice to have skills are. They can be really tricky questions to point to hiring managers because they usually come up with a wish list, and then I have to be the one to have the difficult conversation that maybe the wish list doesn't exist in the market.
Of course, people
And
want
then
Superman.
Oh, absolutely. Often, we have a saying in recruitment that, they're looking for, um, a unicorn that just simply it doesn't exist. So they're always fun conversations to have. And then I'll talk about what process they want to run with the shortlisting, with the budget will always be an interesting discussion as well. Sometimes I have to share a lot of market knowledge in terms of budget if it's under market to what they're describing, and then I'll confirm what that interview process will look like as well. So then I've got my understanding of go to market. Sometimes I will advertise, but not always. So there is a search process that's really heavily built into our recruitment practices as well. I might call people that I know might know somebody that's good for this. So a referral process is really strong part of my selection and search function. Then we're building a longer list. We make a short list, obviously getting the CVs over to the customer. We write up really quite detailed briefing sheets. So that will go as the first page before the hiring manager moves on to the CV. And that's basically summarising, why we've identified they are, a good fit for the shortlist. And then, managing through each stage from there. So scheduling interviews, managing the offer, and then certainly a lot of aftercare processes, whether it's a permanent but particularly if it's a contractor, I'll then be setting up regular meetings to gather feedback with both the contractor and the line manager.
Wow, that's quite an exhaustive process, and there's so much to unpack in this one, Tess. Let's go step by step. So how many times do you actually go via the referral process as opposed to promoting the job ads?
Look, I would, it can be very case by case. I more often than not will seek some referrals because I'm a really big believer that, good talent knows good talent. And, over the years, I've built out a really, big network. I know a lot of people, but I'm, constantly surprised by every week in the market, finding new good new individuals to speak to. So the power of referrals is really strong. But, sometimes it might be in a space that's, newly developing in a particular type of technology, or it might be a project that is new to me, that I think to myself, oh, I haven't worked on a project like this before. So that's when, the advertising processes and then the search functionality, whether it's through our database or Seek, we can search through the back end of Seek as recruiters and the back end of LinkedIn. That might be a lot more powerful in those circumstances as well. But more often than not, I might speak to someone, for example, that I think is really good for the role. They might not be available. And then I, will always say, well, this obviously hasn't been the fruitful conversation for right now. All the best with the rest of your project, but let me know if you know anyone.
Right. So with this whole point about the backend database that you all have access to, help me understand this. So we're saying there's some applicants who apply for the position, but the applicants who haven't applied for the role, but you still have access to their profiles from Seek or LinkedIn.
Yes.
So your pool size becomes bigger then. It's not just the applicant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's talent pooling that you do as a recruiter that's a part of, I have ways in which I can use my own Profusion system to pull people into different folders so that I remember who's good in what particular type of domain. So that's a personal approach that each recruiter will take. But the pool itself, is everyone who's relevant for the role. And there's just various avenues in which we can find those people, and advertising is just one of them.
Right. So I believe I'm presuming every recruiter would have their own CRM system in the organization where you maintain, all the records of your applicants, your organizations, employers, and then you have your needs section where you put down notes, personal notes against each applicant, how good they are and how they interviewed and what their strengths are, their weaknesses, and possibly putting a black mark against some of them if they didn't present themselves well, or they said something awkward, or does that happen?
I don't like using the term black marks in this industry. I'm a really big believer that there is the right candidate for every job, but we definitely do take very detailed notes about, everything from the initial screening call. If, you're talking to a recruiter for the first time, pick up, the energy and listen, because it could be the start of building like a really meaningful relationship. So yeah, and then in terms of how the rest of that process goes, whether might see some strengths and weaknesses, internal interviewing processes that I run, all of that's, very heavily recorded. We're prolific note takers, us recruiters.
100%. And I'm sure all BAs relate to it because that's part of our job as well, taking notes and listening.
Absolutely.
So what's the role of an application tracking system in your hiring process? There's so much of, discussion going on in the market around ATS, the application tracking software. Some people feel that recruiters these days don't even go through their profiles. It's all automated. The filtering happens through your system. So walk us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is quite a hot button subject at the
Mm,
moment, isn't it, Gaurav? Yeah.
100%.
So, look, as you can already probably see, it is just one part of a much broader process. So, when it comes to the ATS world as well, there's lots of different products out there, like any other software environment. So it's very varied, and all consultants are quite different in their approach as well. So the role of the ATS is very dependent on, the consultant at the other end of the process, what the type of role is. The more niche the role and the harder to find the skills are, the less reliance on search functions and filtering within the ATS will be used. But certainly, I will use some basic filtering to narrow down a really big candidate pool, to find what those essential requirements are, and then maybe work backwards from there.
Right. So it's got a role, but people use it differently. Is that a fair statement?
That's very fair.
Okay. Now, I've heard so many candidates doing this, as you would be aware. See, most job descriptions have specific keywords advertised for that role. So what people generally do is they overfill their resumes with the hope that, there's this ATS system behind the scenes, which will hopefully shortlist.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So is it really required?
I was so pleased to hear this question, Gaurav, honestly, because it's a bugbear within the industry, that I can totally understand the driver behind the individual that might do that,
Mm.
Wanting to grab the attention of the person on the other end of the application process rather. But it is largely time wasting, to be honest. I think my best advice to anybody that's thinking about doing this, it goes back to the adage that I think recruiters like myself have been speaking to candidates about for years, which is certainly you need to tailor your CV. Your resume, it shouldn't just be this templated document that goes out to every role that you apply for, because there will be little nuances and experiences that we don't share in our CVs, otherwise they might be 15 pages long. So think about tailoring, your CV to certain applications, absolutely. But just adding keywords for the sake of it will vary. We can see that from a mile away. I had an example of this, just yesterday. It had come up in my broader filtering, coming down from 400 applicants to maybe 100. And I was looking at this profile, and one of the key essential requirements was shown once at the top list of the key skills, but then nowhere else in the rest of the resume. So it's really quickly apparent that there's, no evidence that that particular skill set or requirement has actually been used in their career.
Fair enough. And that's a wake-up call for all those people who are doing this. And now, is it fair if people have worked on a specific skill or a particular technology for them to zoom into that particular role and then expand on it so that the resume stands out when they've applied for that specific role? Is that fair?
Should absolutely do that. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think that the key here is to not overblow your experience. So, be honest and transparent. We will, as recruiters, we want to put you into roles that you are set up for success in. There's no point in being disingenuous with your recruitment consultant. We want to help you, right? But we can only do that if you have a transparent relationship with us. And if I ask you, what's your experience with X system, and you overplay that, and then it comes out in the interview process, then I'm, probably going to question, your level of, integrity as well. So it might make me cautious about the sorts of client environments I would want to put you in front of.
And I spot on, and I almost feel if let's say that's this candidate, let's say gets through it and then finally lands with this job, what if they're not able to perform there? It's even worse,
Exactly.
right?
It's just a negative outcome for all.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Now, whilst we're on the topic of candidates and shortlisting, tell us what are the key things you look for when you're shortlisting a candidate for a role? Your top few things.
Okay, absolutely. So, look, number one, at the end of the day, we need to fit a shortlist to the brief that we've taken, and you heard about how detailed that brief is. So, I will work backwards from the essential requirements, but that's my starting point. In terms of some more general things that I look out for in BA profiles, I'm looking for whether you're more of a functional business facing BA or more of a technical BA to ensure that that's a good fit for the brief. I'll be looking again, I sort of mentioned it earlier. Is there a particular stage of a project lifecycle that you've gained most experience in? Ideally, I love to see BA profiles that have good end-to-end experience, and have good tenure from one contract to the next. I think the best profiles, and people that have the opportunity to see through the life of a project. Understanding that sometimes that these things can be out of people's control, of course. I will look for what sort of methodology they've worked within. Does that fit the client environment? Some environments are a lot less agile, mature than others. So there's a range of different things, but probably number three in terms of how I finally get to my shortlist would be, what has the engagement with that candidate been with myself? So what was the screening process like? Were they open to doing an internal interview with me? Were they responsive? How engaged were they through the process? That will play quite a factor as well.
Wow. So tell me, are there candidates who come to you and say, hey, you know what, I'm not interested in interviewing with yourself. I would directly interview with the employer. Has that happened? People refusing?
I don't know that I've ever gotten a complete no. I think that over the years, I would have definitely dealt with individuals that didn't understand the value of the
Mm.
process, perhaps, and were trying to push back at first.
Yeah.
But I've been able to generally convince people that it's a worthwhile process.
Yeah, I think people generally sometimes think in short-term gains. So they think that that's the only position they're applying for, but they forget that once they've established a good relationship with a recruitment consultant,
Exactly.
they're going to reap the rewards for years to come, I would say.
Yeah. Like if it's somebody that has contracted through me multiple times, I'm not going to, necessarily suck time out of their calendar
Mm.
by doing a formal interview process, internally with myself. But if it's somebody that's new to my network, I need to be able to do my due diligence to ensure that, I'm putting the right person in front of the role.
100%. And going back on the topic you raised about, functional BAs versus more tech BAs, I think the other day there was a role advertised by Profusion Group, on LinkedIn talking about a BA role. And I could see clearly it was mentioned that this is for business BAs. This is not for tech BAs. I quite appreciate that. A common problem which the BA community faces is they read the job description, but when they go and physically start working at the role, they discover that it's a very technical BA role, which they were not told about. So
Mm.
I think calling that out clearly on your job description really is so helpful. Thank you for that.
Well, I'm thankful to be working with a client that gave me a good briefing as well.
Wonderful. Okay, now talking about, candidates, continuing on with that, there's a common complaint from many candidates. Recruiters don't get back to me after I've applied for a role, or once I've been rejected, I've failed an interview, no one gets back to me. It goes into the ether. Walk us through what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah. So I'm very aware of this common complaint that runs through the market. And look, I think that there's two elements to this narrative, I suppose, which it's not just a narrative. I know that it does happen. But the ability for recruiters to respond to every applicant that comes through to us is really challenging and nigh on impossible, particularly in job markets like we're in right now. We are in a tough market. There are a lot of people looking and actively looking. So that, makes it, really, really challenging. We do have processes in Profusion to ensure that direct applicants, have the confidence that they can see their application has come through with a confirmation email. And then, we do have processes to identify those non-successful candidates as well. However, I think where the conversation changes and maybe the impetus gets put onto the consultant, us recruiters, is when that comes to interview feedback, or when I have, had a conversation with you and indicated that you're a fit for a role. That's when I, take my responsibility to update you on that process really seriously. There's just nothing worse than sort of, I can put myself in that position. You hear about an opportunity, you think that sounds good for you, and then just never hearing back. That's, my networks are really important to me. So I'm not going to be able to maintain my relationships in the market by doing that. But I think that, it's important for candidates to remember that we're human beings at the end of the day, and there's just only so many hours in each working day to be able to get back to every applicant out there.
I think most people understand it. Like, gone are the days when you had like a handful of people applying for a role. It's now like we're talking about hundreds, if not thousands. Of course, there are hundreds of people applying for any role at any given point in time. No, that's fair. Let's talk resumes now, Tess.
Okay.
So tell us what you look for in BA resumes.
I was listening to your earlier interview with John,
Yeah.
and I just honestly concur with so much that he was saying. Some of the real basics can be forgotten in BA resumes in particular. I think about the role of a BA, and communication and documentation, and oftentimes, telling a story is such a big part of your role, right? So if I'm looking at a resume that is poorly formatted, has poor spelling and grammar through it, or is difficult for me to understand the narrative of that career background, that's a little bit of a red flag to me. I honestly will notice that if I see that there is a really good skill set behind maybe, just a slightly poorly formatted CV. I might pick up the phone and say, hey, you look quite relevant for this role, but can we have a chat about the structure and the format of your CV? So I do, often do that. So that's number one with me. I want to see, not just a list of responsibilities. I want to see, what was the nature of the project? It's really interesting how many times people forget to explain to us, the brand new reader, of, your experience, some context and background, rather than just, talking about your roles and responsibilities.
No, I agree. A lot of BAs have this natural habit of saying, "Hey, I wrote user stories, I wrote acceptance criteria, I worked on an agile project." That's good. As a BA, you would have obviously done that, but tell us the story behind it. Why did you do it? What was the project about? What did you accomplish? What were the outcomes?
Mm, mm,
Yeah, that storytelling needs to come.
absolutely.
And I can see common themes between yourself and John, where you both articulated grammar mistakes,
Mm.
spell checks not being done, and all the common little things. So yeah,
But
people
I mean, we have technology here to help us these days, right?
absolutely.
Look at that squiggly red line and pay attention to it.
Yes, right click it and fix it, please.
Mhm.
Okay. So talking about resumes, Tess, how many resumes on an average do you review for one role? Ballpark?
Yeah, this is a difficult one to put an average on. It is very case by case basis, and maybe quite different for contract roles versus permanent roles as well. So, it also can, very much depend on how niche the skill set is. So I'll be having those early conversations with hiring managers to give them a sense of whether I'll be sending maybe a short list of 5 people. That I probably wouldn't ever send more than 5 in one go, or whether this is a really small market of suitable individuals, and I might be sending you 2 to 3 to start with just to get the ball rolling. And, that's also just, in terms of, oh, you were talking about how many I review for a role as
Yes.
well, though.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's when it really becomes so case by case. Sometimes I speak to hiring managers and can think of names off of the top of my head that will be, suitable for them. Other times I might be market mapping for them and bring them, a picture of what the entire relevant geography looks like in terms of the people that are suitable and available for a new project that they're standing up. So the spectrum is anywhere between, maybe up to 10 different people I might look at and quickly be able to say, okay, it's an urgent contract recruitment. Here's the best 3 I know that are available now. To it's, standing up a new strategic piece of work and they need a permanent leader to begin that whole new initiative, then I might spend weeks, looking at hundreds of profiles.
Right. And does it make a big difference when a good candidate is not available immediately, but a slightly less good a candidate is maybe available right now? Do you have to?
Depends on, sometimes I will ask the hiring manager, what's more important to you?
Mm.
Do you need, good old bum on a seat tomorrow or yesterday, as is often the
Yes,
case?
absolutely.
Or, is somebody with a 4-week notice period that fits your requirements going to be, suitable for you? And again, that often depends on project, life cycle, what stage everything's at. Is it a replacement role? And, you're screaming towards go live in 6 weeks, or is it a permanent strategic position? That's when those things will be really different.
Right. Give us some examples of some common mistakes that candidates make in the resume, apart from spell checks and all those problems.
So I do think that I've noticed recently, I'm not sure what is going on, but a bit of a common theme over the last couple of weeks, for whatever reason, just some basics being missed off people's CVs in terms of location, contact details. That boggles my mind. So
Right.
I want to know where you are and how I can call you.
100%. Okay. Oh, good.
You'd be surprised how often I see that.
My goodness.
Um, but I think that, we did speak to the heart of what are the most common, mistakes and pitfalls are, which is talking about what those contexts are. The background of what you've done in an organization is so meaningful, and probably highlighting the core achievements gets missed quite a lot as well. And failing to, it's funny, the flip side to that error, conversely, sometimes, as I'm failing to do right now, is people have failed to be succinct sometimes in their CV as well. So it tends to be one extreme or the other, I find.
Yeah, like some write like literally 1 or 2 page long CV and then they're done with it, and some go on for pages and pages, and you're like, give me the meat of the matter.
Yeah, it's like everything in life. Balancing is probably a good approach.
Yeah, I think that sounds fair. Yeah. So I take it you want like the long version CVs, right? At least where you get to understand the story behind it, as opposed to one or
100%. Yeah. Recruiters want to know more information, not
Mm,
less.
yeah.
If you have
Mm,
a 10-page CV, like give that to me, and then we can work on shortening it down for specific application processes. But that means I'm never going to miss any sort of
Yes.
niche or critical skill that I might be looking for one day.
Okay, so basically it's better to come up with a long version rather than a short version, right?
Yes, absolutely. And if I know that I'm working with a hiring manager that is really time poor and is never going to read a 8-page, 10-page CV, I'll tell you, I want to make sure that you're given the best opportunity, right? And then you and I can work together to, sharpen it up into a 2 or 3-page version.
So recruitment consultants take the time to talk to the candidates, work through the resume, make changes. So you spend all the time doing that as well.
Absolutely. There's no point otherwise. It's, if I hear a really great candidate over the phone talk to me about how I hear that they're fitting all of the key requirements, but there's a gap between that conversation and what I see on the CV. Oh, I'm not going to be, we build trusted relationships with our clients as well, right? But, I could spend, all day explaining to my clients why they have the experience, the candidates have the experience, but it's not shown on the CV. More often than not, it needs to be on there for the clients to trust that it's actually happened, right?
Right. Okay, now that makes sense. So speaking of resumes, Tess, BA certification, does it add strength to the profile of candidates?
Yeah, absolutely it does. I think that it's the BA career journey is a really interesting one in which, oftentimes there's, coming from more of a technical background to, become a tech BA or more of, a business background, maybe started it as a SME to become then more of a functional or business BA. And I do see sometimes the people that have failed to formalize their BA skills, throughout the course of that journey. And I often will say to people, have you considered, getting yourself certified? You can do some micro certs along the way to maybe becoming, a CBAP BA. I think that in general, recruiters love seeing lifelong learners, right? It's something that I think tells a story about who you are as an individual. Learning, if you're passionate about that, in terms of the way that it can enhance your capabilities, then those sorts of people are generally the ones that will add the most value to an organization and a team. So yeah, I think that there's something that I definitely look for, and there's a lot of value in doing any sort of certification in whatever field that you have, but definitely including BA.
I'm so happy to hear that, Tess. I always tell people BA certification helps you in so many ways. Of course, it improves your knowledge, adds credibility to your profile, makes you a more confident BA. People can even look up on the International Institute of Business Analysis website. There are some survey results there that show that there's some correlation between BA certifications and income levels too. You can,
Yeah, right. That's interesting. I was even just thinking now, reflecting on some of the searches that I've done when I've been looking for senior BA candidates. I've added things like CBAP into my searches to
yes.
like get to the heart of, the top tier really quickly.
Absolutely. And I tell my candidates, go for at least ECBA, the entry level BA certificate. Start there, start
Yeah.
small, take baby steps, and then go all the way up to CBAP. Go through ECBA, CCBA, and then CBAP. Or if you're on a specialist track, then go with other data analysis certifications or cybersecurity analysis certifications. There's so many certifications available there, but at least make a start.
Absolutely. You've got to start somewhere.
Right. Okay. Now coming over to cover letters. How important are cover letters for you?
Look, to be honest, I think that cover letters can be a little bit redundant when you are applying to a role with a recruiter.
Mhm.
Um, I talk about cover letters with candidates quite a lot at the moment, though, because I am helping people that I know well with processes that are direct to organizations and their internal hiring teams, and internal recruiters and line managers. I think that's when cover letters have a lot more value. ATSs, for example, will not push out cover letters to us. So cover letters were probably, a lot more relevant in the days of where every application went through like an email process. But I think particularly when it's a permanent senior role, that's when they suddenly become a lot more important. And there has been occasions when I have been working on such a position, a sort of senior strategic position, direct with a client of mine, and encouraged candidates to put cover letters together. And I said, I'll put that at the beginning of your submission process.
Right. Okay. And what exactly do you think your cover letter should contain?
So yeah, it's a interesting topic as well. Look, I think that it's probably easy to work backwards from what they shouldn't contain, which
Right.
is just a repeat of your resume. That is something I see sometimes that I think, well, you've just made this document even more redundant, unfortunately. What should cover letters contain? Look, I think the cover letters are a really great opportunity to bring a little bit more of yourself as an individual to the process. And you have the opportunity to really sort of create a direct line of dialogue with the hiring manager on the other end of this application. So I think a really outstanding cover letter will be one in which the applicant has done their research, they've looked at the organization, they've tried to figure out, which you usually can deduce from the job advertisement, who the line manager is, or at least think about what that job title is, what might be important to them. Research the advertisement, take your takeaways on the key value adds that you can bring to this role, and speak to that in a really, I suppose, authentic way, in the way that you wouldn't necessarily do in your CV.
Yeah, in the days of generative AI, now people are more and more using AI, tools to fill up their cover letters, write the resumes. Can you make out when you look at those CVs and cover letters?
To be honest, look, like I said, I don't often read the cover letters.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think we all know the tips and tricks for there's a few, key adjectives that AI loves using that we don't necessarily use in common Australian English, right? So things
That
that
gives it
we're all
away.
pretty au fait with seeing through that.
Wonderful. Okay, now I'll keep pressing some hot buttons now. Uh,
Okay.
what happens when your candidate failed the interview and you've asked the interviewer and the interviewer did not disclose to you? So what happens there?
Yeah, that is definitely a hot button subject. So the situation is, I've had somebody interview with a client and the client's not responding to me.
Right.
Yeah, it's a very frustrating one that does happen. And we don't love it as recruiters. We won't follow up just once. That's when we become what I have tended to call a professional pest.
Mm.
I will try multiple calls and emails to follow up in these circumstances. But ultimately, I end up having to feel like the applicant at the other end of it as well. Like, no response obviously tells us only one thing, that obviously it was unsuccessful. And then I will, try to keep that candidate on the other end of the line updated as to, my failed reach outs. Look, it doesn't happen, I think, as much as it used to. I think us as a community, recruiters have, really helped educate the hiring manager community about the importance of that dialogue that we create with them, but it does still happen, unfortunately.
Right. And in the instance when you did hear back from the employers as to why the candidate failed the interview, what are some of the common mistakes they've shared with you?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think that number one is I would see a theme around people not being prepared.
Mm.
So it's quite interesting. I take a lot of time in my process to do interview preparation with candidates, and I can often tell, whether their head's in the game or not, so to speak. And look, particularly for candidates that are still in roles when they're interviewing for their next position, I fully appreciate it's, really challenging to carve out the time to do that preparation, but it's so important. I think because I work backwards from most successful interview feedback that I receive often is around the client saying how well prepared people were and that they'd done their research. So, the reverse is true when people are unsuccessful. I think that another one is, not thinking about the sort of questions that are important to the process and showing that you're interested and engaged. So there's some of the basics, but I think when we come to like interview skills with BAs, I think it's sort of linked to the CVs, right, Gaurav? So a lot of assumptions get made in interviewing. I find talking at this high level, about, okay, so, the question might be around how you worked through mapping out current state to future state. And this, response comes back that's so high level because I think what happens a lot of the time is the BA is sitting in front of a BA leader and they think, well, you know how that happens. Like, I don't need to spell this out to you. But no, you do. Billy, you need to spell it out. Like, tell us exactly the steps that you took. How did you come to the future state? How did you get in front of the stakeholders? Were you the one that ran the workshops? What tools and technologies did you use to document? Did you break down epics into user stories, et cetera, et cetera? And then, did you do that? How did you do it? It's the how that I think gets forgotten a lot in interviews. And I think it's because of this presumption. It's like, well, you're a BA, you know how this happens. I'll never forget one of the earliest pieces of unsuccessful interview feedback that a client said to me was, in a nutshell, I think this candidate can do the job, but they didn't describe their experience in a way. I can only go off what's said during the interview. So, I really remember that would have been in like my first year or so of recruitment. And I've taken that with me to, guide candidates in this way. Like my interview preparation conversations often go through this point. Be really prescriptive.
Perfect. No, that makes sense.
Another common one is probably the common pitfall, I think, is the more behavioral questions. The difficult stakeholder question is, such a bugbear for a lot of BA candidates that I know. It's like, well, all stakeholders are difficult. Where do I even start here? So I think that's where it comes down to being really well prepared will help overcome that as a challenge for candidates. So if you break it down, what is the role trying to do? What are the core requirements? What sort of project is this will help you understand the stakeholder landscape. And then that should play into your preparation, right? So you think about, it doesn't have to be the same type of stakeholders, but similar stakeholders. And, a challenging stakeholder might be just one, that was really difficult to nail down their diary. And that's a really easy example to then say, this is how I managed to get in front of them. So I think that people overthink that type of question, in the interview. And it's interesting, though, because if you do your preparation, that should help sort of guide through that.
And we have such a wonderful STAR framework that helps you navigate all these behavioral questions. It's about practice and preparation, right? Just to give an example, I've come across some candidates who probably looked up on the internet. They've learned what BPMN is, what UML is. And when I speak to them and I'm like, can you make a process flow diagram? Yeah, I'm aware of UML standards. I'm not talking about UML standards. Whether you use an activity flow diagram or whether you use a swim lane diagram, doesn't matter. So long as you can communicate the process flow to me. And people have a habit of, I think, learning quick information from the web. They learn the buzzwords, they prepare for an interview without understanding the depth involved, what the skill involves. I would suggest people should learn the skills as well, as opposed to simply applying for a position because they know the keywords.
Absolutely. I think a lot of guidance I've given to the more like technical BA space, or indeed like more technical types of people that I've recruited over the years, is if you get a question in an interview about, a tool or a technique or a technology that you don't have experience with, oftentimes people will use, an adage similar to, they'll either try to use those buzzwords, right, and create a false sense of capability there, which is not great, and you can see through it really quickly. Or I find the alternative often is also, I don't have experience with that, but I'm really keen to gain that experience. And it's like, well, okay, that's great, but a better approach is probably saying, I don't have that experience. I'm really keen to get it. And let me give you some examples of previous times in which I've come into a new environment and picked up a new tool or technology. And this is how I went about doing that in a really quick fashion so I could add value within the first month.
100%. I think that's a very good tip. I myself have come across people who said, I don't know, I don't know Lucid Chart. And I'm like, no, I'm not asking about Lucid Chart. As long as you've used some diagramming tool, could be draw.io, could be Visio. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, you should show that you can use a diagramming tool and then you can make diagrams on it. Which tool the organization has could be different as long as you can show your skills. Moving on, how to perform better during interviews and increase the chances of getting hired.
Okay. So
What are your top tips?
I just need to one last time encourage everyone to do the 3 Ps. You know the 3 Ps. You don't, preparation, preparation, preparation. Otherwise, what do we get? Piss poor performance. So I just honestly want to encourage people to not undervalue that part of the process. But another thing that comes to mind is, look, as human beings, we make really quick judgments about, what's in front of us, right? So the reality is that you are making an impression when you sit down for an interview, whether it's the moment that the video turns on or the moment that you approach your interview panel and shake their hand. Judgments are being made, right? So this might scare the community that has interviewing nerves, and we could all probably have a whole nother conversation about that. But what I want to talk to is about how important creating that rapport is at the beginning, particularly as a BA, where it is such a big part of your role in conduit functionality that you have. But it also goes to a really key interview question that I think people more often than not don't slam dunk. And that's the really basic introductory question, tell me about yourself. It is really wild to me how often people fumble with this.
Yeah.
Even really senior, experienced, top talent often gets this wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So my advice for tell me about yourself question and how to create a little bit of a framework around how to do that in a really strong fashion is to work in reverse chronological order, giving a really brief background and start where feels comfortable for you. Some people do like to give the entire life journey. I think that sometimes that's nice for Australian migrants. I studied in this country, I moved to that country, I came to this city at this time. I don't think it's necessarily it's essential to do that though. But don't start from where you are now and walk, in chronological order backwards, because then what you're finishing on is less relevant to what's at hand for today's interview. Finish on, your experience that best relates to the position that you're interviewing for. And, when you finish with, this is what my current role is, and pulling out a couple of little relevant pieces of experience that directly relates to the hiring manager that you've just met, then you can really easily finish off by saying, and that's why I'm really excited to meet you today and talk about this position that I think that I've got an excellent opportunity to add value to. So, and that should all in all take no more than sort of 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay. Okay. Now that's an excellent framework. Thanks for sharing that, Tess.
That's okay. And then I think the one other thing I wanted to share with you is it kind of speaks to, those individuals that get really nervous around interviewing. And I feel for you. It is not a natural human experience. And also, I think, you really have to sell yourself in an interview, right? And that is not a natural, personality trait for all of us, right? It can feel uncomfortable selling ourselves, so to speak. And one of the best pieces of advice I have for that, and it is to practice out loud. So don't do all of your preparation just with a pen and paper or against a spreadsheet and however people track their, processes. Grab a friend, grab a family member and say, look, could you just spend a boring half an hour with me? I want to run through some interview responses with you, because saying it out loud will help make it feel more natural, less tongue-tied, and particularly with that introduction one, you could get that nailed to a script that you know how to really confidently start with.
No, 100%. Great tips. So just clarifying the part where you said preparation is needed. So obviously we need to prepare with our own resume as to what work we did in the past, preparing for behavioral interview questions. What part or how much importance would you put towards people preparing for that organization, learning about the organization, about that specific role they're applying for?
Oh, look, I think it's a huge part of the preparation that you should be doing. Organizations almost carry an ego about them, right? They want to see that you've done your research. And the best interview feedback that I've received from clients has spoken to that.
Right.
When I hear, oh, so and so clearly did their research. And I've, spoken to candidates about the way that they've thrown in little bits of knowledge about the organization along the way. I'd just be listening to that conversation thinking, oh, they would have eaten that up. That's brilliant. So I think it really can't be undervalued, that part of the process. Equally, have a look at who you're meeting with. How long have they been in the organization? How long have they been in that role? What sort of educational background did they have? Do you have any mutual connections? That might be a really nice way to be able to build some rapport at the start as well.
Wonderful. Speaking about reading about organizations, I would like to quote an example, my own personal example. There was an organization I was interviewing with many years ago, and I went on their website, started reading more about their upcoming future projects. One of them caught my attention, and in my interview, I quoted that as an example, saying, "Hey, your future vision looks like this, da da da, and you're planning to embark on this journey, and I would be keen to be a part of that journey." So that stood out because they clearly saw that I had read their website. I had an understanding of what they're working towards. So yeah,
Absolutely. And you would have seen, right? Their eyes light up and
yes,
you're thinking, yep,
like
I've
I'm
got their
speaking their
attention.
language. Wonderful. Hey, we have come to the last part of it now. Any piece of advice for candidates in the current job market? I know people are jobless for 6 to 12 months these days.
Look, I think number one is be kind to yourself, and really, taking care of your mental health is so important through this process. I really feel for the individuals that are finding it harder than usual to find their next opportunity. And I think some basics that come to mind is to try to create a good day-to-day routine, even though you're not working. And don't make all day, every day about job hunting, and, just being on LinkedIn and Seek and the job boards all day, every day. That is not going to help your mental health and your state of mind. So there are a couple of just, take care of yourself, it's really, really important. And then the other sort of core piece of advice around this at the moment, I would say, is how critical networking is. So, whether it is networking with your recruitment consultant and keeping in touch with them. Um, I know some individuals, when they're looking in between contracts, will just shoot me a little call or text every 3 to 4 weeks to just say, hey, Tess, I'm sure that, nothing suitable's come up because you haven't reached out, but I'm just reminding you I'm still looking. That's a really good approach. Then, doing virtual and really importantly, face-to-face networking events. But then they're really traditional networking as well. Like, think about who you've enjoyed working with previously and just start flexing your networks and your relationships. Reach out to people that you might have been at a peer level with and get a sense of, what's happening in their current project and team. A lot of successful new roles at the moment are being won, that way. So networking is really, really critical.
Yeah, I 100% stand by your words. There's no alternative to networking.
No.
No.
And again, it's not natural for everyone, right? Like, I'm a natural networker. I love it. I understand that it can feel strange to sort of reach out to people unexpectedly. But particularly if, say somebody's given you a reference in the past. I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with somebody who was saying, like, oh, but I just feel awkward about using them as a reference again. And I was like, well, was the last time not a positive reference? I was like, oh, no, like, there was a really good reference. And I said, well, people don't, agree to be referrals only for one phone call. Don't feel awkward about it. And it's the same with reaching out to engage a conversation about what new working opportunities could be like. If you've left with a positive relationship, there's no reason why you should feel awkward about just reaching out and sending a little message to say hello.
I agree. The world is full of good humans. I think people need to give them a chance. Wonderful. I think that was all I had for you today, Tess. Thanks heaps for making time for this podcast and sharing such invaluable insights with all of us.
Pleasure. I did warn you that I do talk a lot, so I think that we went a bit over time.
I think we got a lot of good value out of this conversation, so I'm sure
So,
people would learn heaps from it. Beware, people may spam you now. Okay.
that's yes, that's very true. But I'm always welcome new people into my network, girl.
Wonderful. That's so kind of you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Tess, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Bye.
Okay.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you are interested in more insights, check out another interview I did with the senior BA practice manager, John, where he shares valuable advice for job applicants in the BA space. The video link will be somewhere here on the screen for you. The link is also in the description. If you have any further questions or thoughts, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. And if you're looking to further enhance your skills, I offer comprehensive BA training. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this. Thanks and see you in the next video.